Welcome to the FNDN Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. Melanie, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here. I think I've been looking forward to this conversation because we're going to get raw and real about the state of things when it comes to HR. But firstly, let me welcome you to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here with a fellow cat/dog person. No complaints.
Diving into our pre-show talk there. I'm going to dive straight in. I think we're in a really interesting time as a profession. I think we're in a really interesting market as well. It probably wouldn't be remiss of me to say that things have changed pretty drastically in the past few years towards being a much more employer-centric market. I think, you don't have to go far to see that turnover is at like relatively historic lows for a lot of companies. But on the flip side of that, we're seeing hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications coming through for a single role. I'd love to get your take on what's the market at the moment as you're seeing it, and what does that look like in terms of a shift for the HR function?
I mean, I'll start by zooming out for a second and say that I do think this is cyclical, right? We've seen it happen before in waves. It's an employer market, an employee market. It's a pendulum. And right now it happens to be on the employer side. I am sure in no time at all, it will switch right back to the employee side. But what I think is happening right now, which no surprise with the advent of AI, taking so much with AI taking such center stage right now, there are a lot of employers that are moving quickly out of, in my opinion, a lot of fear, a lot of pressure coming from CEOs who want to be able to show to the board, to their stakeholders, to their investors that look how quickly we are moving. We're not falling behind on AI. They even want to show to their competitors that we are focused on talent density, which means that we should be able to do more with less. And so there is this pressure that we are seeing to just cut, and have each employee give 2, 3, 4, 5x the value that they were previously able to do. And while that is happening, and until we right-size ourselves, I do think that's going to continue. But again, and I can share more on this it's interesting, but I do think that in the not too distant future, we will swing.
Yeah, so I guess with that in mind, so we're obviously seeing the market. What are some adjustments that you think HR teams might need to be considering or making, given that we're coming out of, like you said, it is cyclical. There is change afoot. What are some of the things teams need to adapt to in terms of this new reality?
Is that a spicy take and a less spicy take? I'll start with spicy.
Let's do.
My spicy take is I actually think the most impactful thing that HR professionals could be doing right now is mentoring their CEOs through what I personally believe to be a period of vast imposter syndrome and AI panic. I think that CEOs are feeling the competition and the pressure amongst other CEOs and their investors and their board and their competitors. And they're so scared that they're not actually able to press pause and think strategically. They're just sort of like, fire people as they're
reacting.
Yeah, exactly. Fire people today. Let's have these new roles now. And we've seen this before, right? We saw this around 2020, 2021. Hire everyone, give all the person benefits because we got to keep people, got to retain the market. And then what happened in 2022? Just mass layoffs because it wasn't...
Back to the office, all that, yeah.
Not sustainable. This is a common cycle we see with CEOs. And listen, I'm not judging. The CEO has the hardest job out there. I wouldn't want to be a CEO. I couldn't possibly do it. But the benefit that we can bring to them is sort of giving them a space to press pause and think about what is it that you actually are trying to achieve? Why are you nervous? What are you scared of? What are you trying to avoid? Great. Let's think about a plan that achieves that. If I can do this for you without firing 20 people, can we try that first before or, 20 people, 20,000 people. Think about how big your company is. So that's the first most impactful thing I think professionals could and should be doing today, which is get inside your CEO's head, understand what is driving them, what are they so stinking scared about, and how can you have those really powerful, real talk conversations. Spicy thing, which I think most people are already talking about, is how do you make sure that to the extent possible, the workforce that you have is becoming increasingly well-equipped to navigate the new AI-forward world. So that's things like, sure, the obvious hackathons and training them on basic AI skills, but it's also things like, how do you dream bigger? I think a lot of why so many employees are scared right now is because their current roles as we know them today are disappearing, and that feels scary to them. But what they're not seeing is, what opportunities does this open up for you, right? This doesn't actually mean that you and your skill set is obsolete. What it means is your work as you did it today is going to become obsolete. And that should actually be a good thing.
That's an exciting thing. It's actually, that less spicy take is actually one of the things that I'm so bullish on for us as a profession. Like for me, it's super exciting that, and look, I don't know if I'm where I sit in the pack of like first mover versus laggard or whatever. I definitely always feel towards the back half just with social media, but the capabilities that you have at your fingertips now with AI are incredible. And I think the opportunity to help a workforce adopt that are incredible. Not to mention how we can enable ourselves as a function as well. And I think we're in a really prime position to be able to do that. So I love the idea that, yeah, we can be kind of front and center to helping the workforce adopt some of these technologies, these shifts and things like that. And also like dispelling some of the fear where we can.
I think that's exactly right. I will say one caveat that maybe is contradictory to what I just said, which is I think it's so important to be really specific in the way that we're talking about AI and how to leverage AI. And what I mean by that is I do think sometimes when we speak about AI in these terms that are overly lofty and overly aspirational, it actually just feels inaccessible. It feels out of touch. When you tell an employee you're supposed to 3x your output with AI, what does that mean?
What is an output? Yeah, when?
And I'll be honest and say, I had that reaction initially as well. When AI first became all the buzz, I remember my CEO, saying things like, wow, Melanie, eventually you'll be able to vibe code an HRIS. We won't even need an ATS or HRIS or any of those anymore. And the reality is that's probably not true anytime soon. But second of all, that made me immediately resistant. And so better is to say, hey, let's just take a practical look at the things that you are trying to achieve today and how AI could help you achieve those things better. Now let's take one step further. What else could you do now that we've offloaded these things? What does that next level look like?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's one of the major reasons in the conversations that I have around why AI often feels really inaccessible is that if you look anywhere, social media, LinkedIn, wherever, people are kind of talking about this this lofty thing, accomplishment or ambition or whatever. And it's like, for so many people, the first step of just being able to play with AI, understand how it works. I was saying to someone the other day that just this past weekend, I, for the first time, used Claude Code. And for months, I have been like, in the back of my head, that little voice, like, you're falling behind. You don't know how to use AI because, all over social media, all these people are doing these incredible things with Claude Code and you haven't even opened it up. So it's so often helping people just take that first step and making it less intimidating to then take the path towards whatever those lofty ambitions may be, right?
1,000%. You know what's funny? The more of these conversations I have is the more I realize that, this is not actually anything new. This has been HR's skill set for so long. How do we communicate things in accessible ways? How do we educate how do we educate employees in ways that are relevant to the work that they're doing today? AI is just one more thing that we are training them on. It's really not, it is momentous it is monumental in the impact that it's going to have, but it's not new in the sense of it being a new process, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. And I think it's the only real key difference I would say I see is just the pace with which it's evolving as a opportunity or whatever. And I think that's another thing that just causes people to go, oh, great. Like, I was 2 or 3 releases behind yesterday. Now I'm 4 releases. And now I'm just like constantly playing catch up.
Oh, Okay, so I was having a conversation with another HR person about this a few days ago, and we were talking about, not to make this too spicy, but I don't know if you recall, like what back, early on in this particular administration, there were a bunch of changes to what people were and weren't allowed to say in the U.S. with regard to DEI. And there were all these things like, should we cut diversity, equity, and inclusion? What new words do we use? All this stuff. And it was horrible for a lot of reasons that are quite personal to me and to other HR professionals. But it was good in this one respect, which was it forced people to really ask the question of how effective have our existing DEI initiatives actually been at achieving the thing we were trying to achieve anyway? Like, is this not actually a good opportunity to sort of stop and think and reassess our strategy? And the thing I have been really liking about AI is it's really been forcing us to get really locked in on what effective change management looks like. What does company-wide adoption look like? Whether it's a cultural change, whether it's a tech, adopting new technology, what does that look like when it's done well? Because it is more important than it's been in a very long time that we get this right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it touches back to your first spicy point around like the role that we have helping CEOs navigate this current circumstance. And I want to dive into this a bit is like, in many ways, that's the like doing that right builds the credibility to be a good coach to the C-suite and to the CEO. So I'd love to understand like that's one branch in which I think HR professionals need to shift from this like employee-centric market. We could kind of be a little bit more idealistic in some of the initiatives we've pursued to now it's like actually it's quite clinical that we need to be a very commercial forward organization, and we can't really have excesses or niceties and things like that. We really do have to be focused on the things that are going to help our organization be successful because the pressure is on in many ways. What are some other ways, or how do you sort of see that role shaping up for the HR professional? Any like other things that you think help us be an effective counsel, coach, guide, support to that CEO role?
First thing that comes to mind for me is, are we asking the right questions? And are we holding our CEOs accountable to their part in this relationship? So let me get more specific. I think that a lot of times, a common mistake that HR professionals will make is there's some tension between them and their CEO and they don't call it out. Maybe you propose something and your CEO completely dismissed you and you never talk about it again, right? Better would be, hey, CEO, I noticed that proposal did not land with you at all. And in fact, you never commented on it again. What would better have looked like? Or why was that not of interest to you? Where did I lose you? Where in the proposal did you tune out? I think that, CEOs need to be educated on how to better leverage us. And we also need to be educated on how to more effectively partner with our CEOs. And the only ways that's going to happen is by having these really open, transparent conversations. But I want to be very clear here. What I am not saying is, wow, CEOs are so dumb, and if only they listened to us, everything would be perfect. No, we're both falling short here. Most times when I look around at the CEO, HR, CPO relationship, usually it's a combination of we are not asking the right questions, we are being too rigid in our ways and not actually paying attention to the bottom line and understanding the CEO's perspective. And then the other side is true too. The CEO is not thinking about how the people strategy feeds into the overall business strategy, how to effectively leverage your CPO to make sure that your business is thriving.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates a lot. One of the things that just came to mind to me for some of these conversations that I have, I think especially in a sort of startup scale-up context, is that often the pressure for these kinds of outcomes can feel like it needs to be immediate. How do we, or I guess how have you seen, how do you help navigate some of that time constraint when it can feel like the right path is actually a longer one and that the CEO can't hold up examples or outcomes to a board or different, in as short a time frame?
I actually think I would go a bit meta here. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it's usually the right answer is a combination of the two. What is the long-term plan and what is the short-term plan that can help us in the meantime? So, for example, what needs to be true today for you to stop being so stressed and worried that we are falling behind as a business? Oh, you need to see these things? Okay, let's achieve it in these ways. Now, what is also alongside that? What is the longer term plan that we're going to be going after? Oftentimes, what the CEO wants to know is, that you have a plan in place to do something today, not a plan to do something tomorrow or 3 months from now, but that you are in fact taking action today. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I do think that there is, for good reasons and bad, a stereotype that HR moves too slowly, and CEOs want to feel comforted and reassured that you are in fact taking action, even if it isn't everything happening right.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of the things that I feel like I talk a lot about with respect to being a challenge, an opportunity, a shortcoming in some respects of the HR profession is like, I don't think we do a great job of marketing ourselves, not only ourselves, but also like what we do, how we're doing it, how we're going delivering it, like these sorts of things. And you know, like concepts like a roadmap, like it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be the only department not to have these sorts of things. And I think you're right. Like often the angst comes from like, I don't have clear sight of how we're moving towards this outcome rather than it being something that we need to have an immediate answer for.
Oh, totally. And sometimes it is as simple as I have seen these 2 underperformers that no one's actioned on. Therefore, I'm extrapolating and believe that you're doing nothing, right? And so sometimes asking those really specific questions to understand what is the specific thing that makes you believe we are not taking action today. What is that thing and how can we address that now? And then separate that out from this bigger picture issue.
Yeah, I love it. I want to move on to like this sort of think about how to frame it. It's like the HR role often gets talked about as like, it's a lonely role and it's a role that needs like or tends to sort of miss out on like support and HR for HR and those sorts of things. What are some of the ways or like some practical ways that we can embrace that role despite the constraints and without like letting it make us cynical of the environment, of the company, the CEO, sucks, those sorts of platitudes?
Wait, okay, I think I'm not following the question. I'm following that HR can be a lonely role. What's the question?
Yeah, I guess in the context of like, it's often one that, again, if you spend time on LinkedIn, it's like a common talking point is like, how are we supporting ourselves? How are we helping ourselves get through what is like, again, a changed environment? I won't say it's a more difficult one. I think it's just a changed one, which is that some of these concepts, like you mentioned, DEI has changed and we have to do a better job of like proving it now. How do we help, I guess, ourselves as a profession navigate that without feeling like it's become oppressive or unreasonable to have these expectations?
Oh, got it. Okay. I'll be really blunt here and say that I think that it's your own narrative to build. What I mean by that is, listen, if you want to be in a problem-dwelling mindset and you're kind of like, wow, this is horrible and I just need to like languish in this for a moment. I'm not judging you at all. Like it might be that is the place in your life where you are right now and you're not in a place to be more solution-oriented, more creative, and maybe for good reason, right? Maybe you have a terrible leadership team. Maybe everyone completely dismisses you. Maybe you have personal things going on. Maybe you're not looking to be particularly ambitious right now in your work life because you've got personal life that you're focused on. You just had a kid. You just adopted a cat that decides to jump on your desk in the middle of an interview, right? I want to throw out there that I don't think what I'm about to say is right for everyone. It might be that for some people, listen, I'm not looking to actually get out of this. I just need to have like a community group that I can lean on when I need a space to vent. That's cool. Now, if that is not the place you want to be, and maybe you're like, no, I want to love my job. I want to love coming to work every day. I want to feel respected in the workforce. I want to have a better relationship with my CEO. Then I think the move really is to ask yourself, what would need to be true in order for me to be happier at work? And what is within my power of control to make that happen? If what would need to be true is that your CEO needs to treat you with greater respect, okay, what is step 1 that you can do? I know, talk to your CEO and say, hey, CEO, you know what? Truthfully, I'm not feeling super respected in this role. I want to own that, I've played a part in this. I'd love to know from your perspective, is that true? If it is true, what would need to be true in order for me to actually command that respect, in order for our relationship to be stronger? You have to be willing to have these really tough conversations and accept that you are part of the problem. You are always part of the problem. Everyone is part of the problem because really what it is there's like a process issue happening. somebody's not communicating effectively to the other, but like, this didn't happen to you, right? You're not like a passive marionette dog. You have agency, you played a role in this. And so like, how can you be part of that path forward?
Yeah, I love that. I guess like to drill down that a little bit more, because again, I see this, and maybe it's just my experience rather than an industry-wide like truth, is that often it can be hard in this role to advocate for yourself in that way, whether it's because I want more respect, or if it's because I think I'm due a pay increase, or it's because something, I need some professional development or something like that. How do you think people can either self-develop or find ways to develop the confidence to actually be able to have those sorts of conversations? Because I do genuinely think, I've faced it myself. It's certainly been a constant of my journey, but I see it, as being a widespread malice that we do sometimes struggle to take ourselves from being the fence sitter to being actually, no, it's time for me to like put myself at the front and talk about that for a second.
Hush. I'll start by acknowledging some of the things that I think make it a little bit easier for me, and then I'll answer your question more tactically. I want to acknowledge that one of the things that I love is I just love problem solving. I love problem solving, and so whenever there's a problem or I feel like something is not working, it feels less personal to me, right? If like somebody was rude to me, I don't personally have the internalized thought like, wow, I did something wrong, or they don't like me. I wonder what went wrong in that conversation. If I caught them on a bad day or right on the heels, like I will go on their calendar and see like, oh, did they just have a rough? Like I genuinely like, I don't see it as a me problem or even a them problem. I see it as like almost like if I was watching The Office, and I'm zooming out and I'm trying to understand like what led from point A to point B. And I do want to acknowledge that like that does make it easier than if I was like very emotionally invested in this. If you are emotionally invested in this, which like I want to acknowledge, not in a judgmental way. I think that everyone is wired a little bit differently. And that's why I put this out there. Like if that is harder for you, I want to acknowledge, right? That like, oof, like you may have to take some steps for yourself to pull yourself out of that. Maybe put in a list of questions that you ask yourself the next time someone's rude to you, someone dismisses you. Like, what are all the reasons that this could have gone wrong that had nothing to do with me? And let's start. So I'll throw that out there because it's just so much easier to solve a problem when you don't immediately feel like it's your fault that something didn't work. The other now, so more tactically to answer your question about what can you do about it, my favorite thing to do for the past couple of years now is at the start of every quarter, I will go around to every member of the leadership team. And so figure out what version of this feels most accessible to you. Maybe it's a peer, maybe it's an employee, an IC, a new hire. Because again, I want to acknowledge the power dynamics. Maybe you're not ready to go directly to your CEO. And I asked 3 questions. Let's see if I remember them all right now on the spot. So usually it's, what people initiatives do you think were a waste of time and why? What do you wish I had been partnering with you on instead? And if you were in charge of the people team, what would you change? The reason I ask those questions is because I learned a few years ago that the most frustrating thing is pouring your heart and soul into an initiative that nobody cares about. And that, quite frankly, probably isn't having the impact that you think it is, because if nobody cares, it's very hard to have impact. It just is. And I find that I save myself a lot of time and headache by just going up front and asking proactively, what are those things you're sitting on that like you didn't want to comment? Yeah, Melanie, your engagement survey was a waste of time. It was 20 questions too long. I had no idea what it was going to lead to or why it was going to make my life easier. And quite frankly, you rolled it out at the end of the quarter when my whole team was busy trying to close a bunch of deals. That's a major distraction. Tells me that you don't understand the business. Okay. It may hurt my feelings for a second, right? But actually what I end up focusing on is, oh, this is gold. Because thank you so much. Like, how much worse would it have been had I not asked these questions and kept doing these things for another 2, 3, 4 quarters, continually
and just eroding credibility.
Losing credibility. Yes, I would rather just ask it up front. The reason why I think that could be helpful to anyone who's struggling is, here's the thing: when you alleviate the burden of people having to say the tough thing, when you put it out there in the first place, it's much easier to receive that feedback. How cringy is it when someone unexpectedly reaches out to you and says like, hey, Matt, can I give you some feedback? No one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear that. But if you, Matt, proactively ask me, hey, Melanie, I'm just looking to like level up. I was curious to know, like, what about this interview would have been better? Like, what questions do you wish I had asked instead? That's just so easier to receive than me giving you unsolicited feedback.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing there's almost like your first point was like almost like I guess there's an opportunity for like a daily reflection, really, to sit down and go, okay, did I have a conversation that I felt like could have gone better or something like that? What are some of the contributors to that? Maybe check the calendar, maybe just ask them, whatever might be your preferred course of action. But then this like more like programmatic or I guess function wide review that you can undertake as a business partner and really reach out and understand whether or not some of the impacts that you're hoping to have are being felt by the business.
I think so. And I guess the last thing I would throw out there is sometimes it actually helps to open up and be a little bit vulnerable. Sometimes people don't realize the impact that they're having on you. So to be able to say, listen, I didn't like how that meeting went. I actually walked out feeling like you don't actually respect me as a leader. I'm going to assume that that's not true and that something is off here. I'm curious to know, like, what do you think went wrong in that meeting? I just think when you bring down your shields a little bit and you remind people that you are a person too, you are also an employee, it sort of puts people in a different mindset. Like, oh, okay, this is not Melanie, HR, trying to make my life miserable. This is Melanie, who has 2 cats and a dog and is, just trying to get through her day, same as me. You know what? Let me level with you, Melanie. It wasn't personal. I was really frustrated because of X, Y, and Z thing. And you know what? That initiative you rolled out, it did make my life a lot harder. I'm sorry I took it out on you that way. Can we figure it out, though? Because it is really important that we change something. That it just like lets the wind out a little bit. I don't know if that's the right saying, but it just makes it a little bit less.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. And I think just reminds people that like you're all trying to paddle in the same direction, right? Like we're here to help that business achieve their goals to achieve the company's goals, right? Like we're all in this together in that sense. I want to let you in on a little secret about the speaker lineup for this year's Startup People Summit. We've got the one and only Jessica Zwan joining us. Jessica is giving a keynote on people ops as a product and the role of AI. And that's just one of the incredible speakers we've got lined up. Don't miss out. Follow the link in the show notes and sign up to the waitlist to get first access to VIP ticket pricing before it increases.
I think that's exactly right. And I think just for anyone who's listening in on this, I don't want them to misconstrue what I'm saying. What I'm not saying is that you should go to someone and be like, wow, you really disrespected me on that call and you don't take me seriously, because that's going to sort of raise their hackle. The point is to approach with empathy, but also honesty. Hey, like, I'm going to assume it wasn't personal and that this wasn't your intent, but I need to be honest with you about how I felt walking out of that conversation. Because at the end of the day, like, I respect you and I want this to be an effective partnership. And it doesn't seem like that's what we're doing right now. Can we talk about it?
Yeah, that statement does so much to take some of the sting out of it, doesn't it? I know you probably didn't intend this, like, that here's how it was felt. Like, let me just level with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I lost my question I was going to ask. Actually, I wanted to go down one of 2 paths, I guess. One, I feel like we've touched on both these, so we could segue either way. But one of them is we've kind of talked about this like brand HR. How do we like be really clear about what we're working on? How do we evaluate it in the context of the business, things like that? We'd love to understand, we had this term get thrown around, kind of like department of +1. I'm sure there's many others where we're kind of in this position where we tend to be lumped with stuff that doesn't always seem to fit cleanly in other departments. What are some of the ways that we can either like push back, defend on something like this, or maybe really the right approach is actually to evaluate whether or not it's something that should sit with us versus other parts of the business. But I guess ultimately prevent ourselves from becoming overburdened with things that don't feel like, they're either priorities or just don't fit somewhere else. And so suddenly it gets lumped on HR.
Ooh, okay. I think I have an answer, but let me not make assumptions here. Is there a particular example of the kind of thing you're thinking of?
Yeah, I guess AI feels like an easy, relevant one, which is just like, make it happen. We need to be an AI forward company. And certainly the last company I was in-house for, that was a responsibility or a remit, which like quite generically got lumped on the HR function. It was just like, AI is a thing now. you need to help us, embrace it as a business. Go.
No, fair. I'll start with what I think doesn't work. I've seen a lot of HR professionals do this, and I just don't think it's nearly as effective. What doesn't work is saying, hey, that's not my job. Or, hey, I'm already, I've got a full plate, like give it to somebody else. The reason why is because that sounds to your CEO like you're not a team player. Like you don't see the business goals as your goals. You see yourself as separate from the business goals, right? You always want to make it abundantly clear to your CEO that I am here for the business. That is my top priority, same as it should be for every member of the leadership team. So what I think works better is focusing on, is this actually the most effective strategy? Is it sitting with HR the best chance that this initiative is going to have for success? Now, if the answer is yes, what needs to be true in order for us to be able to effectively roll out AI adoption? Maybe it means we need to deprioritize some things. Let me test this with you, CEO. If I were to tell you that I was going to deprioritize, in fact, let's skip our employee engagement survey altogether this year in favor of me having more time for AI adoption, how would you feel? 9 times out of 10, your CEO is going to say, yeah, cut that other thing. I don't care, right? It's all about how you frame it. Now, alternatively, where you might land is, well, I actually am not an AI expert. Let's be real. I was not hired for my technical expertise. Am I really the best person to train the company on Claude? Maybe not. I mean, certainly I can try. I'm happy to take classes, but is that actually the fastest, most effective way to do this? Or is more effective to have, I don't know, say our head of engineering lead that? And I can partner with the head of engineering to ensure that rollout is effective. But let's see, would you rather have me, HR, non-technical person training employees on this? Or would you rather have expert engineer training employees on this? Sounds like the latter. Okay, cool. Then let me partner with you on how to make that happen. So in my opinion, it's all about making sure that you're framing things from a strategic perspective, and always in the interest of what is going to be the best decision for the business.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing almost a sense of okay, how do we, if this is a true priority for me, how do we reprioritize what this expanded kind of bucket looks like, just to make sure that that's focused the right way? Or alternatively, let's collaborate on whether or not this is actually the right place for it to sit, or if it's, with engineering or somewhere in the middle, or whatever the solution might be, depending on your circumstances.
Yes, but one step further, CEOs hate when you bring them a problem. So if you go to your CEO and say, well, okay, we agree this is important, but then how are we going to reprioritize? Your CEO is like, why? Just fix it, right? Better is to say, hey, CEO, I agree with you and have identified that this is the most important thing. Therefore, I believe we need to deprioritize these things. Any concerns? No? Great. Boom. See, it's just a little bit different. You just want to make your CEO do as little work as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Remove the friction. Awesome. All right, I'll come up with a better segue for this. One of the other topics I was really keen to talk to you about is this, we're in this interesting space where, and I don't know if I'm wearing rose-colored glasses or whatever the saying is, in the sense that I guess in many respects am fractional, and so naturally I associate with more fractional people, or I see it in the market, or I'm more aware of it. But certainly from a trend perspective, it feels like we're seeing the emergence of that as a form of work or a career path or something like that. I'd love to just get your sense of how you're seeing that show up in not only working within companies, but as a profession, and how it's being embraced. And then, maybe we can talk about it a little bit more from there.
Sure. It's interesting thinking about this, because my perspective has actually been a little bit different. I feel like post-pandemic, a lot of people went fractional and even started freelancing. They were just so burnt out and exhausted. The company politics, by feeling disrespected, by feeling like there were no boundaries around work and life. It was just you're basically working 24/7 because you're on a salary. Whereas when you switch to fractional or consulting, you have very finite, constrained hours that you work. Every hour that you work is paid for, and you are removed from the majority of the politics. And so I actually have noticed people shifting back a little bit towards in-house, because what I'm hearing now is, I miss that sense of camaraderie. I miss the stability that came with a job and not having to constantly chase after my next opportunity. I miss the career growth that comes with. So I'm actually curious to know, are you seeing differently?
Well, and this is where I think, like, again, because of the work that I do, I feel like I probably am exposed to more of it. Or it's like, when you buy a red car, suddenly everywhere you look, you see red cars, right? Like, I think it's that kind of thing to an extent. I wouldn't say I've noticed a huge shift of people back in-house just off the top of my head, but the points that you make absolutely resonate. Like, just reflecting on my own journey, the thing I miss the most is a team and my team, not the team that you kind of see one day a week that, you do some work with. And yeah, the stability is absolutely something that I could see a lot of people grappling with. It is such a fundamentally different, it's such a big shift from the role that you have where your full and entire focus and attention is on the work and what you're doing and how you're delivering and things like that, to be trying to do that, plus also be like, oh, but what's next? And how do I get that thing? And, having to invest time and capital and things like that. So the reasons absolutely make sense to me. And I've certainly seen people try it and then go back. But yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily tout myself as being able to spot a trend or something necessarily in terms of moving more or away from it.
I mean, here's what I wouldn't be surprised by, and now that I think about it, maybe I am seeing some of this, is I do think there's a little bit of anxiety around job stability, even in-house now, right? How quickly is my role going to be obsolete with AI? Am I going to be, is my team going to be downsized? And so I wouldn't be surprised if some people are picking up side hustles, it's like an extra job or two.
On top of a full-time job, man.
Yeah, just so that you've got a backup plan. Certainly, I do some consulting work on the side because I know that I'm well protected if anything happens. That's always been important to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if other people are doing that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious how you see companies embracing that kind of talent. Do you see it happening more? Do you see it being certainly? I'll say this in the context of Australia, the market that I'm obviously in, is that we're often quite slow and traditional with respect to embracing different kinds of work. It's you're either full time or you're not, that kind of thing. I've been surprised by the uptake of the fractional concept. So I'm curious if you're seeing that being more readily accepted. I certainly see startups, again, the environment that I'm in, see that as a great way to get the expertise they need without the cost of a full-time salary. So I'm curious if you're seeing that be more well adopted as well, or if it's still just the same.
I think you're exactly right that startups are where that innovation and flexibility is happening for understandable reasons, right? They're the ones with the most cost constraints. And one thing our CEO said this recently, and I was like, oh, you're so right, is that hardship forces innovation. Right. And so if you are constrained for time, if you are constrained for money, if you are constrained for any kind of resource, you're going to be forced to get creative. And so, yes, I agree that I think it's most common and being leveraged the most in startups. I'm not sure that I've seen a broader trend around this in non-startup, non-tech land.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's in terms of, we've touched on this in many different ways, I guess, in terms of the context of the chief people officer and the career path for people professionals. Is there any either advice or considerations you would urge people to make in terms of thinking about long-term career in the people space? We've touched on things how to know if it's right for you. We've touched on things around how to be clear about what's in or out of your function. I guess, we touch on fractional. So, how do you urge people to sort of think about that in this interesting new environment that we're in? Well, not new, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I think, I feel like I'm going to say something that in a few years, I'm going to look back and think, what was I thinking? But the place where I'm currently at in my life is, I think it's important to take work just a little bit less seriously. And what I mean by that is, I think that when we make our jobs this all-consuming part of our lives, where everything hinges on the success of this proposal, on our boss, being impressed by us, what happens is you overthink things so much. You stress every little thing so much more than you might otherwise if you had work taking up just like a little bit less of your life, your happiness, your brain space. Now, let me be clear. I am the kind of person who has to love what I do. I have to. I can't not like what I do. I would be miserable. And I get a tremendous amount of happiness from feeling like I am having high impact at work. So what I'm not saying is phone it in. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is I think that if you are in a place in your life where work is making you so miserable and you are having incredible frustration, imposter syndrome, upset at work, I think probably the first step that you should take is actually figure out where can you find happiness that has nothing to do with work. Let's fix it first. And then once you have enough happiness coming from places that are not work, the work problems, they just seem so much more manageable. Oh, instead of rude thing, next step, let's have a conversation about them about it with them, right? Versus when you're so deep in it, it's like, how dare this person say that? Do they understand how much work I put into this? I bet they didn't even consider X, Y, and Z. Listen, all of those things may be true. They may all be true, but it's just going to be a more miserable, less effective way to handle that situation versus if you're able to a little bit just emotionally remove yourself from that situation. Same thing with like a work proposal. If you're proposing something you're nervous about, like, oh my gosh, what if I get it wrong? What if it doesn't land? What if it doesn't impress? Right? You're just going to second guess that so much more than if you, and you're going to spend so much more time than is needed or than the ROI merits than if you just were to be able to say, you know what? Seems reasonably sound. Maybe there will be some holes. I can proactively flag that I am actively soliciting people to poke holes in my idea, and then we'll fix it from there, right? Because what's that saying? Good is it like good gets? It's something like you will get better faster if you just throw something out there and iterate versus
It's like
trying
don't
to.
like perfect be the enemy of great or something like that. Those sorts of
That's
ones.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Don't optimize for perfection, right? But like we will when we're in this place where we're so wrapped up in work that any mild slight ruins your day. I think that should be a sign that it's time to take a step back and find happiness outside of work.
Yeah, I hear that. It's like, I'm sure this is broader than just HR, but certainly like it's such a big part of your identity, right? Is your job. And it's the thing people often ask about after what's your name? And it's like the irony for the HR profession is often when we say we're in HR, we get the weird look from people. So it's like a weird like shadow identity that we're like attached to, but don't necessarily like to say to people outside of work. So creating a bit of separation between that, reflecting a little bit on, what brings us joy outside of work. And hopefully that relieves a little bit of the pressure on everything having to be perfect or right at work.
I think so. Listen, for anybody who's listening to this and thinking like, wow, that sounds very woo-woo and hokey, I'll give you a specific example. We were talking about this pre-interview. I have spent the last 2 weeks learning how to mount cat shells for my cats to be able to jump all over my walls. And first of all, it's been so cool because I've learned something new, a new skill set that I never learned before. But two, it's been just like this wonderful distraction outside of work that I have to look forward to. And so, when the day is getting late and I look up and I'm like, oh, it's 7 o'clock and I'm still working, I really want to build these cat shells, right? It's just this awesome reason to take a break from work and think about these other things that are bringing me joy. It doesn't have to be like this big therapeutic, like go on a meditation retreat, like why to do all. If that works for you, great. Like it literally could be as simple as looking around and being like, what's the thing I want to try? Maybe I want to go to a hockey game. Maybe I want to, learn how to do gymnastics. It could be anything that just brings you joy outside work.
Yeah, come up with a bit of bucket list. Well, my own personal admission on that front is that I, over the last little while, and this is going to sound a little more woo-woo, but I've been trying to like think of things that like, when I was a kid, what were the cool things that I either wanted to do or, those sorts of things. And what that's recently led me to do is buy a Game Boy and start playing Pokemon. And so I just want everyone to know that as of last night, I did finish Pokemon Silver or Pokemon Gold rather. So, that's a little tick in my box for things outside of work that bring me joy.
I love that. And see, the next time David in marketing says something that pisses you off, you just remember, That's okay, David. That's okay. I got my Game Boy. I'm rat right now.
I'm putting David's face on the enemy Pokemon, and I'm going to crush you, David.
Exactly right. Exactly.
I love it. Oh, what a note to end on. This has been super insightful. So I really appreciate you jumping on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.